Chapter 1. 1445 of the Gregorian calendar. The 10th year of the Ming dynasty. In a house in Fujian's Jianghu prefecture, an old woman was on the verge of death. She was lying on the bed, and before she died, she grabbed the arm of a 15-year-old boy tightly. "Brother 6, after I leave, you're the one I'm most worried about. Mother, don't go. Chen Dong misses you." The boy was handsome, but his eyes were filled with sadness and fear. He was afraid that his mother would leave him. He was afraid that the person who loved him the most in the world would leave him. But in the end, the old woman let go of his powerless arm and slowly closed her eyes. At that moment, she was so peaceful and so kind. At this moment, sixth brother also closed his eyes and fainted beside the bed. The girl with the face of a porcelain doll had clear and bright eyes, like a clear spring, like watery grapes. Her gaze was unforgettable. She was currently staring at the man in the camouflage singlet who was moving in front of her. Her gaze followed the man's body as he moved. Looking closely, there was joy and satisfaction in her eyes. But more than that, there was confusion and curiosity. She only knew that the young master in her eyes had completely changed. In the past, he only liked to sit quietly in one place, saying, "That's right." Even when he saw Tiger's Mane sometimes brandishing his sword and stick, he would also comment that it was the bravery of an ignorant man. But now, not only did he like sports, he even seemed to be more active in it. What's more, the clothes he was wearing were something she had never seen before. It was so strange, so simple. But looking closely, it was so convenient and comfortable. After old Madam left, the young master's personality changed a lot, but I don't know if it's good or bad. Holding her red cheeks, Qiao Yin's eyes were filled with confusion. Qiao Yin, the maid, didn't know. Tiger's Mane, the study companion and servant, also didn't know that the young master in front of them had been reborn. The young master's name was Yang Jitong. His courtesy name was Chen Dong, meaning the sun rises from the east. His father was one of the original ministers of the Ming dynasty, Yang Rong of the Three Yangs. Yang Rong, original name Daoying, Zirong, courtesy name Mianren, was from Jian and today's Jianghu, Fujian. Position: Guanglu Daifu, pillar of the state, Shaoshi, concurrently holding the position of Minister of Works. Influenced by his family, Yang Guitong studied the 4 books and 5 classics from a young age. When he was 13, he became a Xiaoxia and became one of the scholars. Ever since he was young, he had been taught by the saints and the ancients. Until a month ago when his mother, Yang Lushi, passed away due to illness, he fell into a deep sleep and became what he was now. As the ancients said, rivers and mountains can change, but one's nature cannot change. Even the death of his father 5 years ago and his mother a month ago could not change a person's nature. The reason why young Chen Dong had changed so much, from quiet to active, from civil to military, was because he had changed into a different person. Yang Dong was born under the red flag and grew up in the spring breeze. He was a 100% modern person. Strictly speaking, he was an outstanding and ambitious young man. After graduating from high school, he joined the army. Relying on his own ability, he grew from an ordinary soldier to an outstanding revolutionary cadre step by step. He entered the army's most powerful Wolf Fong Brigade action team. Along the way, who knew how many contributions he had made? But if you walk by the river, how can your shoes not get wet? During a mission, his left leg was injured, and he was no longer as agile as before. In the end, he was taken care of by the chief and assigned to the Armory Department, where he held the glorious position of Armory Division Chief. Originally, he thought that he would spend the rest of his life like this. When he reached the age, he would transfer to another place, marry a wife, and have children. He would live a normal and happy life like an ordinary person. Who would have thought that a new batch of military resources had just arrived at the big warehouse, the abbreviation for the largest warehouse in the final assembly. When he was inspecting and registering there, a huge black vortex suddenly appeared above his head. When he woke up, he came to this courtyard and became Yang Chendong, who was called Young Master. This made Yang Dong know. What should be called Yang Chendong did not understand was that there was a pale 5-pointed star on his arm. He remembered that there was no such thing before. Soldiers were not allowed to have tattoos on their bodies. When he accidentally touched it, he turned around and returned to the warehouse. The rows of guns, piles of bullets, steel cannons, and even a large number of tanks and helicopters that had just arrived. Countless daily necessities appeared in front of him. He could reach out and touch it. The cold feeling of the gun made Yang Qindong know that this was not a dream, but a reality. Thus, a bold idea came to his mind. He picked up a brand new Type 95 assault rifle. Then the idea came to him, and he walked out and came to the room of the Yang family's old house. Luckily, there was no one else in the room. Otherwise, who knew how scared they would be? His left hand touched the pale five-pointed star again, and he was able to return to the warehouse. When he put down the gun and came out again, his whole person seemed to have changed. Getting used to new things and adapting to different environments was one of the compulsory courses for Wolf Fang members. With the idea of taking things as they came, Yang Qindong had already given up on the idea of going back. On the contrary, he was secretly happy. He had returned to the age of 15. The most important thing was that his body was healthy. This was something that could not be bought with money. Of course, what made him most excited was the secret under the five-pointed star. In this era, his advantage was too obvious. Thinking about the piles of firearms, his body could not help but tremble. Everyone had a dream of being a hero. Yang Qindong was especially so. Otherwise, he would not have joined the army, and would not have worked so hard to join Wolf Fang. It was just that he was limited by the environment. He could only complete some secret missions, and sometimes he could not even announce his name. But here, in the middle of the Ming dynasty in the Zhengtong era, he knew that many things that he only dared to think about before could be realized. The first thing that the excited Yang Qindong did was to recover his physical fitness. This might be difficult for others, but for him, a veteran with 21 years of military experience, everything was so natural. Morning jogging was the first change. But his morning jogging was not just a slow jog, but a regular 5-kilometer training. This was just the beginning. As his body gradually recovered, he would continue to increase his training. The first person to adapt to Yang Qindong's change was Tiger's Mane. This study companion was bought by the Yang family when he was young. It was destined that he would rise and fall with the young master in the future. Tiger's Mane also liked to fight. In the past, the young master did not allow him to move. Now, he actually took the initiative to play with physical fitness training. How could he not be ecstatic? Although the maid, Xiao Yin, did not understand the young master's change, as long as the young master was happy, she was happy. In her eyes, Yang Qindong had long become her land, her sky. For this, Yang Qindong had to thank his family background. Although the Yang family was considered a large family, the remaining memories in his mind told him that in this life, although his parents were no longer around, he still had 5 older brothers and 7 older sisters. Logically speaking, it would be difficult for him to have freedom. But they were all in the capital, Beijing. As the youngest, he was the only one who stayed in his ancestral home, Jianghu Prefecture. Because of this, he had more autonomy and could do whatever he wanted. In the month since he arrived, Yang Qindong quickly adapted to his current life. His physical fitness had also improved significantly. But some habits still gave him a headache. For example, he had to deal with urine and feces every day. Chapter 2. In the Ming dynasty, the wooden barrel used for drinking, called huzi during the Han dynasty and mamatsi during the Song dynasty, made Yang Qindong very annoyed. He decided to change and start from this matter. At the same time, he could also take the opportunity to earn a sum of money. Doing things was always inseparable from money. This was the same everywhere. Speaking of which, the Yang family's old house was not small. When his mother was alive, there were many people who served her. There were also artisans and blacksmiths who served the family. In addition, the old master, Yang Rong, used to be the minister of works. The people under him were extremely capable. Soon, the old house's housekeeper, Yang Hai, was called over. When he learned that the 6th young master wanted an artisan to do something, he called Li Xuanfu over. Greetings, 6th young master. Li Xuanfu was a simple and honest man. There was a visible patch on his cotton clothes. It was true that the artisans were skilled, but under the concept that everything was inferior, only studying was important. Artisans were the last profession, and craftsmen were the most insignificant. As a result, their status was too low. Not to mention that they were at the mercy of others. Some of them were even born as artisans. Everyone was divided into 3, 6, and 9 classes at birth. It was difficult to change. Shun Fu had 5 children, and it was because he worked in the Yang family. Otherwise, there would be more patches on his clothes. Master Li, I have an idea here. I have already drawn it. Please take a look. Yang Qindong did not have the consciousness of being superior to others. He was used to everyone being equal. Naturally, he was very polite to people. No, sixth young master. You can just call me Xuanfu like how you call housekeeper Yang. Li Xuanfu had a frightened expression. Although Yang Qindong was only 15 years old, he did not dare to look down on him at all. This was because he knew that he was already a scholar. In the future, he would definitely be an official. How could someone like him compare to him? Looking at Li Xuanfu's nervous expression, Yang Qindong finally remembered his current position. He also knew that some things were very difficult to change, so he was not in a hurry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Shunfu, come and take a look at this picture of mine. This is what I think." When Yang Qindong explained his intention for the first time, Shunfu already knew what the sixth young master wanted to do. It had a seat with a water tank and a flushing valve, a 3-ball valve that controlled the flow of water in the water tank, and a U-shaped bent pipe. At the same time, it was an all-ceramic design. For some of these parts, Yang Qindong had already prepared them. These were all parts in the warehouse. Looking at these exquisite accessories, Li Xuanfu couldn't bear to put them down. He was also fantasizing about what they would look like after they were completed. Yang Qindong didn't disturb Li Xuanfu's thoughts. He sipped his tea and waited until he saw Li Xuanfu's gaze turn from wandering to determined. He smiled and asked, "What do you think? Can you make it?" With the composition of the sixth young master, it should be possible. Li Xuanfu replied with some confidence. "Very good." Chu Fifan couldn't help but snap his fingers out of habit. Then, he pointed at the accessories he brought and asked, "Can these things be imitated? If it's changed to iron, it won't be a big problem." Li Xuanfu didn't know what those white plastic pipes were. Under normal circumstances, these would only appear in the 19th century. That was why he said to change to other materials. Yes. Hearing that it could be imitated, Yang Qindong didn't care about the problem of the material. He just wanted to mass-produce it. In this way, he could sell the toilet and naturally, the profits would roll in. As the saying goes, you can't trap the wolf without sacrificing the child. If the reward and punishment couldn't be clear, the effect wouldn't be too good. Yang Qindong immediately promised that if the toilet was completed, he would reward him with 10 taels of silver. 1,000 coins in the Ming dynasty was equal to 1 tael of silver. 4 taels of silver was equal to 1 tael of gold. When the reward of 10 taels of silver was announced, it could be seen that Li Xuanfu's eyes were shining. At this moment, he was really excited. In the past, if the master wanted to make something, he just needed to provide the materials. As for the reward, he didn't dare to think about it. It was as if everything was justified. From this, it could be seen that the people at that time didn't think about innovation at all. If they had the strength and thought, they might as well do other work to supplement the family. Yang Qindong was naturally accustomed to it. He just wanted to use this kind of exciting method to make everyone work for him. It turned out that this was a win-win situation. He took out all the 500 taels of silver that his mother left for him and gave it to Li Xuanfu. If you want a horse to run, you have to let the horse eat grass. He was very clear about the principle. "Young master, just give the money to this servant." Xiao Yin, who saw everything from the side, reached out and took the money. Perhaps in her eyes, the young master taking out all of his family's assets for a child's play really made her feel uneasy. After interacting with each other for a month, Yang Qindong naturally knew who was truly concerned about him. He knew that it was Xiao Yin who was worried. He smiled and said, "All right, then Xiao Yin will take charge of this matter. Xuanfu will cooperate." Originally, Li Xuanfu was somewhat trembling when he saw that such a large sum of money was going to be handed to him. Since Xiao Yin had jumped out at the right time, he was naturally happy to accept it. He nodded his head vigorously and expressed that he would definitely cooperate. After sending the two away, Yang Qindong, who was waiting for the good news, rubbed his palms as he watched the two leave. This money was being spent too quickly. He had to think of something to do and get more money first. As the saying goes, if the house has food, the heart will not panic. Yang Qindong's experience in his previous life told him that if a person wanted to do something they liked, the first thing they had to do was increase their own ability. Then the question was, what was ability? In short, it could be summed up in 2 words: money and power. Right now, he was still young, only 15 years old. There was no need to be too anxious about the issue of power. However, he had to hurry up when it came to money. Money didn't care about age. He turned around and returned to the study. His figure flashed and disappeared. The large warehouse didn't only contain equipment. It also contained the daily necessities of the soldiers who had come from afar. Walking past rows and rows of cold boxes filled with weapons, he arrived at his former dormitory. He didn't know where the people here had gone when the dark vortex came. In any case, he couldn't see a single person. However, their belongings had been perfectly preserved. There was even an intact library among them. Walking in, he casually picked a few novels that he would be familiar with in his future life. Then, he went to a large box filled with seasonings and took some unopened MSG, cooking wine, tender meat powder, and pine nut powder. Next, he passed by the daily necessities section and took some toothpaste, toothbrushes, soap, towels, and other items. Finally, he took a large box of chewing gum and put it in his pocket. Only then did he return to the study, satisfied. That night, Yang Qindong went to the kitchen by himself. Under the astonished gaze of the cook, Yi Chou'er, he made a few dishes and took them away. This scene attracted many people from the old residents to watch. The old lady's mourning period hadn't completely passed yet. Why was the 6th young master already acting up? Chapter 3. Yang Qindong didn't know that his actions had attracted everyone's guesses and imaginations. He just wasn't used to the taste of food and wanted to improve himself. Speaking of which, to become a member of the Wolfang battle squad, one had to complete countless missions. Sometimes, in order to get close to the target, one would even have to go undercover and disguise themselves as people of various professions. He had once worked as a chef for 2 months in order to get close to the target. Naturally, his skills weren't bad. Just as he skillfully threw the sliced meat into the pot, a scream came from outside the door. Just from this scream, Yang Qindong could tell the identity of the person who came. Who else could it be other than the servant girl, Xiao Yin? Li Xuanfu, who had just arranged for the craftsman, was wondering if the young master needed to be served when he heard someone say that he was in the kitchen. He immediately rushed over. As soon as he entered, he started making a fuss and shouted, "Young master, a gentleman should stay away from the kitchen." Wearing the apron he took from the big warehouse, Yang Qindong chuckled to the side. He didn't explain anything, but continued to turn the spatula in his hand. Immediately, a fragrant smell began to spread, increasing one's appetite and making one want to eat to their heart's content. Young master, what are you making? Why is it so fragrant?" Xiao Yin seemed to have forgotten her purpose for coming. She was sniffling with a look of enjoyment on her face. Yang Qindong reached out and unconsciously scratched the bridge of her nose. He chuckled and said, "Little greedy cat, go wash your hands. It'll be done soon." In this month, Yang Qindong had long felt Xiao Yin's reliance and trust in him. Unlike the other servants of the Yang clan's old residents, who all called him the 6th young master, only Xiao Yin and Tiger's Mane called him the young master. This simple missing 6 already proved a lot of things. This showed that they truly treated him as their master, and the others were only forced to call him that because of their status. Don't think that just because you are a servant, you will obey your master. Throughout history, there are many examples of weak emperors and strong ministers, not to mention a small Yang family mansion. Yang Qindong saw everything with his own eyes. Based on the principle that he would treat anyone who treated him well, he would treat them well. Naturally, he treated Xiao Yin, who had rushed over to advise him, with courtesy. This action of scraping the bridge of his nose was something that came from his heart. Xiao Yin, who was completely captivated by the delicious taste, seemed to have forgotten her status at this moment. She simply laughed foolishly and stared unblinkingly at the stir-frying meat slices in the wok. It was as if she would fight with her life on the line if anyone dared to steal from her. "Young master, can I try it later?" A weak voice rang out. It was the kitchen manager, Yi Chou'er. Compared to Xiao Yin's delicate appearance, she looked more burly. But it was precisely because of this physique that she had secretly defeated countless people and become the head chef of the Yang family mansion. She had just called him the 6th young master, but now she had removed the 6. This was enough to prove that her mentality was changing. This was the pressure and change that a capable person could bring to others. Since there were people to serve him, Yang Chendong naturally wouldn't cook every day. The heavens had taken care of him, giving him a transmigration and a healthy body. Wouldn't it be a huge waste to spend time on cooking? Sure, Yang Chendong replied concisely. He also had the thought of testing the other party. If this person changed her attitude in the future, her loyalty could be used. If not, she would have no hope in future. At the very least, he could still fire a kitchen maid as the sixth young master. That night, Yang Chendong, Qiao Yin, Tiger's Mane, Yi Chou'er, and the old butler, Yang Hai, ate together. This was perhaps the most delicious meal the four of them had ever eaten. After all, MSG and tender meat powder hadn't appeared in that era yet. Even the experienced and knowledgeable old butler, Yang Hai, couldn't help but sigh in admiration after eating. This dish is truly fragrant. I think it's comparable to the Imperial chefs of the capital. Yang Hai had been with Master Yang Rong for many years and had the fortune to taste many of the so-called treasures of the Imperial family. His words were somewhat fair. When Qiao Yin and the others heard this, they nodded their heads repeatedly to express their agreement. Only Yang Chendong smiled and said, "If Uncle Hai thinks the taste is really good, then call my cousin Yang Fu over. I think he'll be happy to work with us." Ah, that's right. Young Master Fu has a restaurant in Jianghu Prefecture. There's an endless stream of customers there every day. It's a good source of income. Yang Hai patted his head in realization. Having finished eating, he stood up and walked out. Yang Chendong didn't need to interfere with chores like picking up the dishes. After eating, he took Tiger's Mane for a walk around the courtyard. After digesting the food, he returned to the study. Qiao Yin had already prepared the ink. When she was eating, she heard the young master say that he wanted to write something. She was so happy that she almost choked. In an environment where the Sure group was the ruling group, the Imperial examinations were undoubtedly the path to the heavens for many people. What's more, with Yang Chendong's family background, who knew how many descendants and resources his father had left behind in the Imperial court? As long as he was nominated, his path would be much better than others. In particular, Yang Rong, who had a son at an old age, had personally taught Yang Chendong. At the time, he was so envious of his brothers. The previous owner of this body didn't disappoint. At the age of 13, he became a scholar and was known as a child prodigy. Who knew how many people were optimistic about Yang Chendong's future because of this? And Qiao Yin was the most optimistic among them. In her heart, the young master was simply a literary star who had descended to the mortal world. As long as he worked hard, a great future would be in front of him. A while ago, when she saw the young master begin to exercise and do some strange exercises every day, she wanted to advise him. However, when she considered that the young master's identity was indeed much more solid than before, she suppressed her urge. Now that she finally saw the young master begin to study again, how could she not be happy? After grinding the ink until it was clear enough to reflect a person's figure, Yang Chendong walked into the study and sat down on a chair. With a heroic spirit, he said, "Prepare the brush and ink. It's all ready. Young master, what are you going to write today?" Qiao Yin looked at him expectantly. He didn't answer. On the contrary, a strange smile appeared on his face. "Qiao Yin, you haven't seen the young master write with his left hand, right? How about I show you a little today?" "Really? Then quickly let this servant see." When Qiao Yin heard that he could write with his left hand, she was immediately filled with admiration. The young master really was a literary star who had descended to the mortal world. He was an omnipotent existence. Presumably, his left-hand writing should be extremely beautiful. Chapter 4. As the saying goes, the greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. After Yang Chendong put down the pen, Qiao Yin's face, which was still full of excitement, became increasingly unsightly. It was as if she had eaten something bad and had a constipated expression. It was no wonder that Qiao Yin became like this. It was just that. The words were a bit ugly. If one had to describe it, it was no different from the scribbles of a 3-year-old. Not only that, but Qiao Yin also couldn't understand what he was writing. She looked at Yang Hodong again and saw that he had a serious expression. He was really serious because he was practicing writing. He was used to using pencils since he was young. Later on, when he started writing with a fountain pen, he didn't know much about brushes. But since he was part of this society, He had to do as the Romans do. But if he were to write with his right hand, wouldn't he be showing his cowardice? It would also be unsightly. He might as well change it to his left hand. It would be logical if his writing wasn't good. Yang Qindong felt good about himself as his brush moved like a dragon. He had always admired his ability to adapt and learn. In just an hour, he felt that he could no longer recognize the words he was writing. At the very least, he could understand what they were. This in itself was a huge improvement. Qiao Yin, on the other hand, looked drowsy. Seeing these words was a kind of torture, but considering the young master's self-esteem, she resisted the urge to say anything. After another hour, who knew how much he had written on the paper, Tiger's main sonorous voice came from outside the door. Young Master Fu is here. Shaking his sore arm, Yang Qindong chuckled as if he was very satisfied with his work. He nodded lightly and said to Qiao Yin, who was trying her best to stay awake, "Arrange what you've written in order." The Yang family mansion had a side hall used to receive guests. At this time, a pot-bellied man was sitting there. He was wearing a silk robe, showing that he wasn't lacking in money. Cousin Fu. Yang Qindong, who had already washed his hands, entered the hall in an ordinary green robe. Before he arrived, his voice could be heard. Looking at the fat young master, he didn't even move his buttocks. Only when Yang Qindong walked in did he raise his chin and greet him. "Sixth young master, why did you call me your cousin to come here?" Yang Fu, Yang Rong's younger brother's child. Just like his name, he had never liked the 4 books and 5 classics since he was young. Thus, he chose the path of business that was looked down upon by others. Here we need to talk about the different classes of soldiers, farmers, workers and merchants. At that time, the status of merchants in society was extremely low, and many so-called gentlemen did not like them. But just like clothes, whether they fit or not, it was all up to the wearer to feel for themselves, and not up to others to decide what to wear. At least, Yang Fu was very satisfied with his current life. He managed a Yang's grain store, a Yang's department store, and a 4 Seas restaurant. He didn't earn a lot of money every day, but at least he didn't lack money to spend. He had truly reached the pinnacle of what people of later generations wanted. He could sleep until he woke up naturally, and count money until his hands cramped. Of course, Yang Fu being able to do all this also proved that he was a person with good eyesight. He knew that no matter which dynasty or society it was, if a rich person didn't have a background to support them, then money was just a matter of time, like the moon in the water, and could be lost at any time. Thus, when he heard butler Yang Hai say that the 6th young master was looking for him, he hurried over. In the words of later generations, this was called emotional investment. Once Yang Qindong really became rich, and even became the top scholar, then he would have a backer and wouldn't have to worry about anything. But that was a matter for the future. At least for now, he didn't really care about this 6th cousin of his. Being able to invite him over was already giving him a lot of face. This was the second time that Yang Qindong saw Yang Fu after coming here. The first time he had a vague impression of him was when his mother passed away. At that time, many of his brothers and sisters in the capital had rushed back, and Yang Fu had appeared to flatter them. But at that time, he had just arrived and his body was still weak, so he didn't have a deep impression of him. Now that he was in close contact with this cousin of his, who weighed close to 200 jin and was less than 1.7 meters tall, he had a deeper understanding of him. Walking over to the seat opposite of Yang Qindong clasped his hands with a smile, and then slowly said, "Cousin Fu, everyone outside says that you are good at making money, and that you are very capable. You really make your younger brother envious." Everyone liked to hear good words, and Yang Fu was naturally no exception. Especially when he was praised by a scholar like this, he was beaming with joy. 6th cousin is too polite. Brother also has no other choice. Whenever I study, I feel sleepy, so I can only do what I can. Earning a lot of money without any effort, this is only what you can do. Then what about other people? Cousin Fu, you don't have to be so humble. Yang Qindong continued to flatter, scratching at the itch of the other party. Haha. In the past, I heard that scholars are rotten, and can't stand others being better than them. But after hearing 6th cousin's words today, I know that these are just the words of a lowly person. Yang Fu, who was being flattered, was in a good mood. He immediately categorized the scholars, and even placed Yang Qindong in the best category. But after saying this, his tone suddenly changed. Sixth cousin, we were relatives before, so if there is anything you want to say, just say it. Are you short on money and need money? No problem, just say a number, and I will send someone to get it. If he was polite to someone, he must have a request. Yang Chendong said so many good words to flatter himself. How could Yang Fu not see that the other party had something to ask of him? Could it be that he was short on money? That's right, how could someone like him, who was only cooped up at home reading books, understand the hardships of the world? It must be that his aunt had passed away, and the family's finances were tight, so there wasn't enough money. It didn't matter, he was going to invest anyway. As long as he didn't need much money, what harm was there in taking out some? At this moment, Yang Fu was already prepared to spend some money, and was waiting for Yang Chendong to speak. But Yang Chendong didn't say anything. Instead, he waved his hand behind him, and Xiao Yin walked over with a stack of manuscripts. Cousin Fu, these are some of cousin's recent works. Please help me appraise them and see if they are to brother's liking. Unexpectedly, he didn't want money. For a moment, Yang Fu was at a loss. But since the other party said that he wanted to appraise it himself, then he just gave it a quick glance, and then casually praised it. Thinking this, he took the manuscripts. His first impression was that the handwriting was too poor. It wasn't even as good as his own. In any case, he had studied for a few years when he was young. Curious as to who wrote such unsightly handwriting, Yang Fu raised his head and looked at Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong lightly nodded, indicating that he should continue reading. Yang Fu was also curious as to what kind of good things could be written with such handwriting, so he lowered his head and looked at the first page. With one look, he was unable to extricate himself. The handwriting was truly ugly. There was no need to doubt it. But it had to be said that the content was truly wonderful. After just reading 2 pages, Yang Fu had a feeling that he couldn't stop. Especially since there was basically no one who knew anything about it, and everything was written in plain language, so even an ignorant and incompetent person like him could understand it clearly. Chapter 5. Page after page, he continued to read. Sometimes he would frown, sometimes he would jump for joy, and sometimes he would slap his thigh to express his excitement. What a joke! Yang Chendong's novel was the representative work of Jin Yong's famous martial arts novel in the future. It was also Jin Yong's work that had the most readers. Its publication established Jin Yong's status as the king of martial arts. It was The Legend of the Condor Heroes. Guojing, Huang Rong, Southern Emperor, Northern Beggar, Eastern Heretic, Western Poison, Central Divinity, and many other characters were interspersed in the novel. The novel described Guojing's life from a weak to a strong one. He was determined to fight for the country and its people, resisting the Mongol army's invasion of the southern Song dynasty. He represented the moral integrity of the nation. Of course, he couldn't write so fast in the beginning. Even so, Yang Fu was immersed in it and couldn't extricate himself. He only finished the last page when the sky was about to turn dark. Then, he raised his head and stared at Yang Chendong with reddened eyes. Since he was young, this was the first time Yang Fu took the initiative to read a book. He didn't expect to spend more than 2 hours reading it. Of course, this was because Yang Chendong's handwriting was too ugly. It was impossible to read quickly even if he wanted to. Looking at the pair of slightly red eyes, Yang Chendong naturally shrugged his shoulders. That's all I've written. If Cousin Fu still wants to read, you can continue. Hurry up and write. Yang Fu couldn't understand how Yang Chendong could write such a wonderful story. He only knew that he wanted to continue reading and see how the silly Guojing would develop. One cannot live without grains, so one should eat something before writing. Cousin Fu, you're too much. You must be tired after reading for an entire afternoon, so you might as well try my cook's cooking. Yang Chendong had a smile on his face. Then, he threw a glance at Xiao Yin, who was standing to the side. At this moment, Xiao Yin was full of admiration for her young master. She even thought that the reason why the young master had insisted on writing with his left hand was probably because he didn't want others to know that it was his handwriting. After all, reading books and commenting on the world's affairs was the way of a scholar. Writing stories was just an unorthodox way and would be looked down upon by others. Yang Chendong didn't know that he only changed it to his left hand because he didn't want to make a fool of himself, but it would give Xiao Yin so many ideas. Seeing that Yang Fu was so optimistic about The Legend of the Condor Heroes, He knew that his plan had succeeded. After Xiao Yin left, she quickly returned with the kitchen maid, Yi Choer. They each carried 2 plates, 2 meat dishes and 2 vegetables dishes, and placed them on the table Tiger's mane had brought over. The dish was so ordinary that Yang Fu only glanced at it. He had the Four Seas restaurant under him, and the chefs there were obviously better than the average kitchen maid. In his heart, he was more concerned about letting Yang Chendong continue to write the story after he finished eating. However, when the 4 dishes were placed on the table, a wonderful aroma quickly wafted out and entered Yang Fu's nose. He couldn't help but twitch slightly, and then he couldn't help but say, "Why does this dish have such a fragrance?" Then, without caring about etiquette, he picked up a pair of bamboo chopsticks and reached for a plate of braised pork that looked and smelled delicious. It was really rich in flavor, and the fragrance of the sauce spread everywhere. It was fat but not greasy, and lean but not dry. It was a dish that one would never get tired of eating, and was suitable for both young and old. Speaking of braised pork, Yang Fu didn't know how many times he had eaten it, but he had never tasted it as delicious as it was today. He couldn't stop himself from taking one bite after another, as if he wouldn't stop until he finished it. "Cousin Fu, don't be in such a hurry. Try something else. How about this cabbage tofu soup?" Yang Chendong noticed that Xiao Yin and Tiger's mane were staring at Yang Fu with their eyes wide open, and he knew that their cravings had been aroused. He chuckled and nodded at the kitchen maid, Yi Choer. Yi Choer was also a clever person. She could tell that the young master wanted to make another serving for each of them, because the 4 dishes in front of them probably wouldn't be enough for Yang Fu alone. She nodded lightly and left. In just half a day, Yi Choer's impression of Yang Chendong had changed greatly. She also knew that it was all because of the MSG and meat tenderizing powder. It was a pity that only the 6th young master had these things. If she didn't have the young master's support, she would return to how she was in the past. Now that she had been recognized, she definitely didn't want to return to how she was in the past. As such, there was only one thing she could do, and that was to stay close to the 6th young master. Yang Fu didn't care about these things. He tasted the cabbage tofu soup, and this ordinary soup gave him a different feeling. He continued to eat spoonful after spoonful, and in the end, he almost lifted the bowl of soup and poured it into his mouth. He ate in big bites, praising the dishes endlessly until his neck was round and bulging. He could not hold on any longer. Only then did he sit down in front of the chair, feeling somewhat unsatisfied. At least 1/3 of the 4 dishes were left, and he sighed helplessly. Looking at his eyes, it was obvious that he wanted to take it away. Although there was no such thing as taking it away at that time, the meaning was similar. "How is it? Cousin Fu, are the dishes delicious?" Yang Chendong's voice sounded at the right time. "Delicious, delicious." Yang Fu couldn't help but say. At the same time, his eyes were spinning rapidly, and it was obvious that he had already started to think of his own ideas. Without waiting for Yang Fu to prepare his words, Yang Chendong took the initiative to say, "Then tell me, if such scattered dishes enter the Four Seas Tavern, it should be popular. At that time, we can get a few storytellers and take turns to tell the story of the legend of the Condor heroes. Tell me, do you think there will be no customers? At that time, even if the price is higher than other restaurants, it will be overcrowded, and it will be difficult to get a seat." Of course, of course. Yang Fu nodded mechanically, but he quickly came back to his senses. "What? 6th cousin, you mean to cooperate with me?" Seeing that Yang Fu was not stupid, Yang Chendong chuckled and nodded. There were many things that he needed to do, and this was only one thing that others thought was amazing. He couldn't spend his limited time on such things, and it was necessary to find a partner. If he wanted to do something, he couldn't lack money. Yang Fu's originally fat and unwilling appearance changed, and he sat up straight in an unbelievable manner, and quickly approached Yang Chendong. Because his movement was too fast, Tiger's mane, who was standing at the side, became vigilant. Out of habit, he actually wanted to attack. Others didn't feel it, but Yang Chendong naturally noticed it. He casually waved his hand, just enough for Tiger's mane to see. While stopping him from attacking, he smiled at Yang Fu's approaching body. This cousin of his was just a little excited, and he definitely wouldn't attack him. Nearly a month of recovery and training wasn't just for show. He didn't dare to say more, as 2 or 3 big men wouldn't be able to get close to him. 6th cousin, I'm willing to cooperate with you, and I'm willing to give you 70%, no. I'll give you 80%. At this moment, Yang Fu was obviously a little excited, and when he spoke, his words were a little inconsistent. Chapter 6. He was really willing to pay such a high price. Yang Fu had already seen the power of this unique dish and the legend of the Condor Heroes. His Four Seas restaurant was just a pitiful business. If it wasn't for the Yang family's name, which allowed him to enjoy all kinds of benefits and reduce expenses in many aspects, he was afraid that it would have collapsed long ago. Now that there was suddenly a big hope in front of him, he wasn't a fool. He would try his best to grasp it. Yang Chendong wasn't surprised that Yang Fu was so excited. Because if he was Yang Fu, he would also seize such an opportunity. Okay, let's cooperate. 70-30 will do. But you have to pay me 1,000 taels of silver first. I have a use for it. Yang Chendong didn't ask for too much. He didn't take advantage of the situation to fight for his own benefits and set the price at 70%. This was also something he wanted to give to Yang Fu. In his memory, Yang Fu had given him money before. Although it was a kind of investment in advance, it at least proved that Yang Fu was good to him. Of course, he wouldn't let someone who was good to him suffer a loss. Okay, then thank you, sixth cousin, Yang Fu said sincerely. He knew very well in his heart that this so-called 10% more would be a lot of money. After that, Yang Fu took the early manuscript of the legend of the Condor Heroes and swore that he would never reveal it to anyone. He took away a portion of the monosodium glutamate, grain wine, tender meat powder, pine nut powder and other things. These things should be enough for the Four Seas restaurant to use for a month. But after a month, if he wanted to continue operating, he would have to come to the door. Yang Chendong wasn't afraid that Yang Fu would cheat him. As for whether Yang Fu would play any tricks on the restaurant's account book, Yang Chendong didn't care. If Yang Fu really did that, with the money, wouldn't he be able to open the restaurant himself? Not long after Yang Fu left, someone sent 1,000 taels of silver. With this, Yang Chendong had the capital to continue doing what he wanted to do. He took out 500 taels of silver and gave it to the old butler, Yang Hai. Uncle Hai, prepare to set up a book printing factory. I have books to publish. At that time, those who could publish books would definitely be great masters. That was something that could only be done with great ability. Otherwise, if he published a book privately and no one bought it, wouldn't he be smashing his own reputation? When Yang Hai heard that the sixth young master was going to publish a book, he was naturally extremely excited. However, at the same time, he was also a little worried. The sixth young master, I think you should first find someone to collaborate with to publish a book. You should also publish fewer books. What if? Yang Chendong did not continue, but Yang Chendong already understood what he meant. Alright, let's do as Uncle Hai says. Let's contact them first. Thinking that he hadn't finished writing his book yet, it was indeed a little too hasty to think about this now. Yang Chendong naturally didn't have to worry that no one would read the books he wrote. In this era, there was really too little spiritual food. Most of the books were the 4 books and 5 classics, or collections of historical classics. Even if it was a story about someone or something, only those who knew about it would be able to read it. He even mischievously thought that the reason why he chose to read it in such a way was that it was easy for people to fall asleep if he didn't read it in such a way. There were few miscellaneous books. Once the legend of the Condor Heroes was published, it would definitely cause a sensation. It was just like when the TV was introduced into tens of thousands of households during the reform and opening up. Any TV series would be highly sought after by many people. At this time, there was no need to worry about the sales of such a book. He was confident about the prospects, but in the end, there was still too little money. 500 taels was not enough to open a printing company. At that time, copper movable type printing was just popular. The cost of printing a book was really not low. If he wanted to recoup the cost, the price would naturally not be low. Naturally, the price was not something that ordinary people could accept. Take your time. Seeing Yang Hai leave, Yang Chendong put this matter aside. Then he asked Tiger's Mane to find Wu Gang, the leader of the blacksmiths at home. He was preparing to make crossbows. In this era, people could be killed easily without any crime. Having money without strength was equivalent to a treasury that could be used at will. Knowing the importance of armed forces, Yang Chendong wanted to improve his ability to protect himself. Of course, there were too many usable weapons in the warehouse, all of which were brand new. There was a small military dagger, a pistol, and a Type 97 military compass. There were also various types of howitzers, cannons, rocket launchers, and several types of advanced tanks. There were even a few helicopters. However, these were not things that should be taken out now. Although Yang Chendong had experienced many trials of war, in order to complete the task, he did not know how many people died in his hands. But he was still a pacifist in his bones. Unless it was necessary, he did not like to kill people, especially Han people. Of course, the small Japanese empire was not a human in his eyes. In the end, Yang Chendong was an absolute nationalist. Except for Han people, other people's lives were naturally worthless. If he could, he would not go against the Ming dynasty government. But the idea was completely different, so the conflict seemed to be inevitable. But no matter what, he couldn't let his guard down. If he wanted to do something, safety was the most important thing. He also had to take necessary precautions. Otherwise, if someone were to sneak up on him one day and kill him and his loved ones, he couldn't guarantee that he would be able to transmigrate again. Blacksmith Wu Gang quickly came to the backyard and excitedly saw Yang Chendong. Everyone knew that Li Xuanfu was a craftsman. Suddenly, his treatment was improved and he was valued, which was the envy and expectation of all the craftsmen. Now that the young master finally met him, Wu Gang also dreamed of becoming such a person. Master Wu, I don't need to say anything more. The young master is fair in his rewards and punishments. As long as you have the ability, I will give you a platform. But if you are mediocre, I can only say sorry. Yang Chendong didn't talk much nonsense. He knew that if he didn't shock the other party in advance, he was afraid that there would be problems in management in the future. He didn't want to involve too much energy because of these small things. Young master, don't worry, I understand. Wu Gang was reasonable. He directly removed the word 6 to express his attitude. Very good. These are some things I need. You go prepare them tonight and come to me tomorrow morning. We will do something together. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with Wu Gang's attitude and handed over a stack of papers with various materials. Young master, don't worry. I will not disappoint your expectations. Wu Gang stretched out his hands and took it. Then he turned around and left, as if he was swearing an oath. He did not make any excuses, which made Yang Chendong have a good impression of him. Hee, not bad. Where is the tiger's mane? Dinner is over. How about we run 10 kilometers? Yang Chendong, who had recovered most of his body, laughed heartily. Are we going to the Yang village? Tiger's mane heard the shout and came from the side. He asked excitedly. The distance between the Yang family mansion and the Yang village outside the city was more than 20 kilometers. Tiger's mane knew this, but he still said this because 2 days ago, when he followed the young master to inspect the Yang village, he fell in love with a girl. She was also a tenant farmer's child, Wang Feng. She had 2 older brothers. Although she was poor, she kept her house clean. Even if she wore patched clothes, she looked so unique and did not give people a sense of inferiority. Tiger's mane was 1 year older than Yang Chendong. He was already 16 years old. He fell in love with her and wanted to go to the Yang village outside the city every day. Hee, we won't go today. The city gate will be closed soon. It is too troublesome to go in and out. Another day, we will run in the backyard. Yang Chendong shook his head and did not point out the other party's thoughts. After that, he turned around and ran away. The 2 teenagers began their after-meal exercise, panting. But it had to be said that this kind of life was what Yang Chendong hoped for. He wanted to do what he liked and live the life he wanted. The next morning, Wu Gang came to the backyard with the 3 important parts: the arm, the bow and the trigger. Yang Chendong just ran for 5 kilometers and had breakfast. He saw the required crossbow and crossbow on the table. The structure of the crossbow could be divided into 3 parts: the arm, the bow and the trigger. The arm was generally made of wood. The bow was across the front of the arm. The trigger was installed at the back of the arm. The most important part of the crossbow was the trigger. The trigger was generally made of copper and was installed in the gua box of the crossbow. In front of the gua hook was used to hang the string, and behind the gua was connected with the Wang Shan crosshairs for aiming. Since the beginning of the Western Han dynasty, the Wang Shan of the crossbow was engraved with a scale, which was equivalent to the gauge on modern firearms. It was easy to adjust the shooting angle according to the distance of the target and improve the shooting accuracy. Under the copper gua, there was a Xian Dao trigger, which was used to shoot the arrow. The crossbow was not a new thing. In the Warring States period, there were ballistas. In the Han dynasty, there were big yellow crossbows and zhuge repeating crossbows. In the Northern Song dynasty, Shenzong invented the three-bowed ballista and the god-arm ballista. They had a long shooting range and a high accuracy. But their shortcomings were very obvious. That was, they were too cumbersome. What Yang Qindong wanted to make was a small steel crossbow. As a former member of the Wolfang, he not only needed to be proficient in firearms and weapons, but also in simple cold weapons. When doing missions, it was not always possible to have a weapon with you. You would always have enough bullets. In contrast, this small crossbow was one of the first choices. It could be shot invisibly and could not be found by advanced detectors. The parts on the table were obviously too big to meet Yang Qindong's requirements. After a few glances, he shook his head and took out the military crossbows, steel crossbows, and military crossbows that he had taken out from the warehouse. Then, with a nimble movement of his fingers, a steel-tipped arrow was ready to be shot out. Whoosh! Without any warning, the arrow was shot out and hit the target 40 steps away. The ancients took one step each on their left and right feet, which was about 2 meters. It hit the small tree 80 meters away. Under the powerful penetrating force, it directly pierced through the tree. This kind of power caused Xiao Yin and Tiger's Mane, who were standing to the side, to be endlessly shocked. Wu Gang ran all the way to the small tree and stood in place with his eyes wide open. He was obviously shocked. Chapter 7. It was hard to imagine that such a small crossbow could have such great power. All right, just make it according to this model of mine. Remember, you can't spread it to others. Xiao Yin, give Wu Gang 200 taels of silver. Yang Qindong knew that knowledge was power. If the method of making this crossbow was leaked, he didn't know what kind of carnage it would cause. Plop! Wu Gang knelt on the ground. Young master, please find me a remote place in the backyard. I'm willing to take 2 of my apprentices to make it together. Without orders, I won't take a step out of the backyard. Wu Gang was obviously a smart person. He knew that treasuring a jade ring would arouse the envy of others. He was just a blacksmith and didn't want to die. Approved. Xiao Yin, go arrange it. You and Yi Chouer will be in charge of the food and drinks for the time being. Yang Qindong patted his forehead, feeling a headache coming on. He suddenly felt that there were too few people he could use. Even keeping a secret could only be done by the maidservants around him. This made him feel the importance of talents. Xiao Yin took Wu Gang to find a suitable room. Yang Qindong called Tiger's Mane over. Young master, I'll give you a task. Go outside and find someone suitable. Remember, there are 3 requirements. First, they can't have any concerns. Second, they have to be capable and have practiced martial arts. Last, they can't be evil people. Moral character is very important. After he finished speaking, he gave the remaining 300 taels to Tiger's Mane. If he wanted to recruit talents, he couldn't be afraid of spending money. Tiger's Mane felt the young master's trust. He immediately knelt on one knee and said, Young master, please rest assured. I'll definitely bring back some talents. I'll go and return as soon as possible. Young master, please take care of your body while I'm away. Hee. You know the young master's ability. Even you can't say that you can win, let alone others. Go ahead. Yang Qindong chuckled. He was still growing, and his strength had yet to fully recover. Tiger's man was already struggling to deal with him. Once he recovered his strength, it would be even more difficult for anyone to get close to him. After Tiger's Mane left, Yang Qindong spent all of his 1,000 taels of silver. Knowing full well that money was no match for a hero, he turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he had a cardboard package in his hand. On it was written, Military Supplies, Mirror. That's right, this was the plastic surgery mirror used by the military. It was used to organize the military and was a must-have item for companies and above. These mirrors had just been sent over by a local manufacturer. They didn't even have time to say the words, plastic surgery mirror. He tore off all the packaging and threw it back into the warehouse. The bright mirror was placed in the side hall. At this time, Xiao Yin, who had just finished arranging things for Wu Gang, walked in. When she saw the bright and clean mirror, which could even reflect the pores on the body so clearly, she cried out in alarm. Xiao Yin heard the clear reflection of the mirror. She had never seen such a clear mirror in her 16 years of life. Back then, most people used bronze mirrors. Not only did they have to be wiped clean, but they also had to be polished frequently to maintain the brightness and reflect the image. Xiao Yin's cry attracted the attention of the old housekeeper, Yang Hai. When he saw the clear mirror, his legs trembled. If he didn't have enough willpower, he might have fallen to the ground. Uncle Hai, please send someone to invite Cousin Fu over. Yang Chendong put his money on Yang Fulai again. This time, Yang Fulai's speed was much faster. His fat body was still gasping for breath. Originally, he wanted to ask why he was summoned, but when he saw the mirror in the side hall, he immediately stopped talking. His whole body was frozen in place, as if he was scared silly. Yang Chendong didn't look at him. He continued to write like rain. He had just started shooting condors. There was still a lot to write. Fortunately, he had read it for a long time before he went to bed last night. With his super strong memory, he could copy it perfectly. He didn't know how long he stood there. Maybe it was a quarter of an hour, or maybe it was an hour. When his legs couldn't support his body anymore, he sat on the ground with a plop. At this moment, Yang Fu finally recovered. When he saw Yang Chendong's inquiring gaze, he couldn't help but be very excited. Sixth cousin, where did you get this treasure? A missionary named John. He gave it to my cousin. He also likes this book. I told him the story. This is my reward. Yang Chendong had already thought of the origin of the mirror. When he said this, his face didn't even blush. So that's how it is. Yang Fu chose to believe him. He had also seen the beginning of the book and was really attracted to it. If he was like this, others wouldn't be any better. Not bothering with this question, Yang Chendong directly asked, Cousin Fu, do you think this mirror is valuable? It's valuable. It's valuable. Sixth cousin isn't going to sell it, right? Yang Fu's reaction was very fast. He immediately changed his tone to an excited one. That's right. Name a price. Yang Chendong nodded. He didn't know that when he did this, Xiao Yin's hands were already clenched into a ball. Of course, she wanted to leave such a good thing for the young master. However, she also knew that the young master was in need of money. As his personal maid, she felt sad that she was useless. But this is a good thing. It's enough to be a family heirloom. When Yang Fu heard that Yang Chendong was really going to sell it, he naturally felt that it was inconceivable. However, when he saw Yang Chendong's expression, he knew that the other party had already made a decision. He gritted his teeth and said, All right, if sixth cousin really wants to sell it, then I'll give you 1,000 taels. Of course, I know that this isn't a lot. However, I'm not buying it. I'm keeping it for you. When you have the money, I'll take it back. Naturally, Yang Fu had good intentions. Perhaps in his eyes, such a good treasure was extremely rare and should be kept as a family heirloom. Thus, he decided to pawn it. There's no need. I advise Cousin Fu not to keep it. That John said that when he comes to the great Ming dynasty in the future, he'll bring more back. Therefore, there may be a lot of such things in the future. Yang Chendong didn't expect that a mirror could be sold for 1,000 taels. Of course, this was also because things were rare. Once such things were sold all over the streets, they wouldn't be worth much. But who told it to not be an item of this era? When he heard that there would be more, Yang Fu's expression changed. All right, if that's the case, the price of this item will be even higher. I'll pay you 1,000 taels first. When it's sold, we'll calculate it together. The previous price of 1,000 taels was only the price for pawning it. If it was sold, it would naturally be worth more. It must be said that Yang Fu still had some business ethics. All right. Yang Chendong nodded. He wasn't very concerned about how much it could be sold for. He was just short of money and couldn't spend it. Once the toilet bowl was made and the Four Seas restaurant's share of the profits came, he naturally wouldn't be short of money. Yang Fu left 1,000 taels of silver, and then led people to carefully carry the mirror away. What was worth mentioning was that this item caused an uproar as soon as it appeared on the streets. None of the commoners who saw this item were shocked. Some even knelt down on the ground and shouted that it was the manifestation of an immortal. This matter quickly spread all over the place. There was no need to advertise the mirror, but the benefits of the mirror were extremely popular. In the end, it was the magistrate of Jianghu who took the lead and bought this item with 3,000 taels of silver. He then presented this auspicious item to Ming Ingzong in the capital. Not to mention how much of a shock this mirror caused. In Jianghu Prefecture alone, the Four Seas Tavern suddenly became popular. Delicious dishes that couldn't be described, and the story of the legend of the Condor heroes was so moving that one couldn't extricate oneself from it. Under this double attack of spirit and appetite, it quickly became famous in Jianghu Prefecture. Every day, when it was close to mealtime, all the seats were filled with people. Some came for the food, while others came for the condor shooting. The originally bleak business suddenly became lively. Yang Fu was so happy that he raised the price again and again. However, this still couldn't stop the customers from coming. He really counted the money until his hands got cramps. The Four Seas restaurant became famous and made money. Following that, the name of Yang Chendong also became known. In particular, every time before the storyteller talked about the condor shooting, he would routinely introduce that this book was written by the sixth son of Yang Rongyang's cabinet, Yang Jitong, courtesy name Chendong. This made his name even more famous in Jianghu Prefecture. This was a part of Yang Chendong's plan. In ancient times, fame was very important when doing things. With fame, it would be much easier to do some things. For example, many students who were famous for their filial piety could even become officials without going through the imperial examination. In this society with an official position, it would be much more convenient to do a lot of things. Good news came one after another. Li Xuanfu didn't disappoint. The first toilet bowl was successfully made. After it was installed in Yang Chendong's backyard, the sixth young master nodded in satisfaction and began to promote it vigorously. For a time, all the officials and rich people in Jianghu Prefecture began to install it. The cost of each toilet bowl was 100 taels of silver. The cost was only 10 taels of silver. This alone brought in a lot of profit. With the toilet bowl making money, the Four Seas restaurant could be described as making a lot of money every day. Yang Chendong naturally became famous, but trouble also came along with it. On this day, the old housekeeper Yang Hai came to the backyard and told the sixth young master that there had been strangers loitering outside the residence for the past 2 days. After hearing this, Yang Chendong didn't have any strange expression. He still had a smile on his face as he raised his head and said, "Uncle Hai, it's already September. Take the people in the residence to Yang Village and see if there's anything we can help with. It's still early for the harvest. There's still more than a month." Yang Hai said with some confusion, but then he thought of something. His expression changed and he said, "Sixth young master, you're not going to stay, are you?" "Yes, I'm going to stay. Since there are people spying on this place, we can't guard against them day and night. We have to give them a chance to show off." Yang Chendong still had a smile on his face, but no matter how one looked at it, there seemed to be a trace of killing intent in his smile. Chapter 8. Yang Hai wanted to object, but when he saw the determination in Yang Chendong's eyes, he finally obeyed the decision. Originally, he had wanted to keep some of the younger generation in the old house, but they were all rejected one by one. According to the sixth young master, they were just petty thieves. There was no need to mention them. He alone was enough to deal with them. But the so-called alone was broken in the end. The maid, Xiao Yin, threatened Yang Chendong with her life, and Yang Chendong was defeated. In the end, except for the old gatekeeper, only Yang Chendong, Xiao Yin, Wu Gang, and his 2 apprentices were left in the mansion. These 3 could not leave. They had to stay in the backyard to prevent the secret from being leaked. In order to lure the bandits out, the Yang clan had made a lot of noise this time. Not everyone in the city knew about it, but when the large group of people left the city and headed towards the Yang clan manor, it still attracted a lot of discussion. Among the crowd, there were 2 thieves who were eyeing the Yang family's property. Compared to the others, these 2 people's faces were obviously darker. The number of wrinkles on their faces also exceeded their age. If an experienced person was here, they would be able to tell at a glance that this was caused by years of exposure to the sea breeze. That's right. These two people were pirates. They were originally active in the coastal area of Fuzhou. Because Fuzhou was connected to Jianghu, they inadvertently heard about Yang Chendong. The reason why rumors were called rumors was because the facts were exaggerated. Just like what the outside world said, the sixth young master of the Yang family, Yang Chendong, was a literary star. He was intelligent, thought of shortcuts, and had friends all over the world. He even saw the white-skinned man as a friend. That was how the mirror was created. It was more like the popular legend of the Condor heroes, and the clean, convenient, quick, and comfortable toilet bowl were also created by this person. How could a person who could do such a thing not be simple? How could he not be rich? Since he was rich, he would naturally become a target in the eyes of the pirates. This time, the two people in the crowd were just spies. They did have some ability. They actually found out that most of the people in the Yang family manor had left, but the sixth young master, Yang Chendong, stayed. This was an opportunity bestowed by the heavens. The two spies hurriedly made their way through the crowd. After making many turns, they arrived at the courtyard of Jianghu Mansion. Here, they saw their leader, Gao Xiong. Just like his name, Gao Xiong looked tall and mighty. His height of more than 1.8 meters made it easy for him to stand out from the crowd. His eyes were like copper bells. Those who were slightly timid would probably be too scared to move when they met his gaze. The two spies told Gao Xiong everything they'd heard, and Gao Xiong couldn't help but nod. Very good. Looks like even the heavens are helping us. All right, let's take action tonight. Hee, let's go meet this literati star. Yang family mansion. The front courtyard was eerily quiet. Fortunately, the back courtyard wasn't a place ordinary people could enter. Xiao Yin was already used to this kind of silence. In the past, she would fall asleep in the evening. But now, she began to close her eyes and nod. It had to be said that she was a girl with a big heart. Even though she knew something was wrong, she still did what she should do. Yang Chendong stood in front of the study with his hands behind his back. He looked at Xiao Yin, who was already conversing with Zhou Gong. The corner of his mouth curled up. Then, he turned around and disappeared. In the large warehouse, Yang Chendong was looking for a suitable weapon. Since he had bad intentions, he was definitely a vicious person. If he wasn't careful, the consequences would be unthinkable. But since he dared to stay, he was naturally prepared to deal a heavy blow and deal a heavy blow. Type 92 9mm automatic pistol. Effective range of 50 meters. Muzzle velocity of 350 meters per second. Overall length of 190 millimeters. Barrel length of 111 millimeters. Weight of the gun is 760 grams. Uses 15 double-row double-entry magazines to ensure that the rate of jamming is minimized. Matched with a small hole suppressor, it can ensure that there is no sound when firing, and it won't arouse suspicion. Kevlar bulletproof vests are naturally a necessity. It is also the best method to reduce danger. He thought about whether or not he should get one for Xiao Yin, but in the end, he decided against it. First, he couldn't explain the origin of these things. Second, he could ensure that the enemy wouldn't be able to get close to him. Xiao Yin, who was standing behind him, would naturally be safe. The newest infrared thermal imaging device for individual soldiers could ensure that no living person could escape the detection of the line of sight. This was to ensure that no fish in the net would escape the net. After spending some time to gather all the necessary items, Yang Chendong's figure flashed and reappeared in the study. The sky was about to turn dark. What should come will come sooner or later. The night was dark and the wind was strong. It was the time to commit murder and arson. The weather was perfect. There was no moon tonight. There was a light breeze, and it was pitch black. It was the best time to commit a crime. Around 2 o'clock, Yang Chendong's ears twitched as he was writing the ending of Shoot the Condor. He suddenly stopped writing and shook his left hand. Then, he looked at the handwriting that had become much nicer and nodded at Xiao Yin. Let's call it a day. You can put it away. Xiao Yin didn't know why she was writing until so late. But since she was used to listening to the young master, she unconditionally followed his instructions. When she finished, she turned around and saw the young master wearing sunglasses and a light green military uniform that she had never seen before. Shoo! Without waiting for Xiao Yin to speak, Yang Qindong had already reached out his left hand to cover her mouth and nose. Then, he made a shushing gesture and moved his body closer. Are you scared? At such a close distance, she could clearly feel Yang Qindong's presence. Xiao Yin blushed and shook her head. With the young master here, Xiao Yin isn't scared. Very good. Then follow me. Remember, with the young master here, no matter what happens, you don't have to be afraid. Understand? Yang Qindong shook Xiao Yin's slender hand and gave her a confident smile. Then, he opened the door to the study and placed a bamboo chair in front of the door. It was still pitch black outside. There was only darkness in sight. Yang Qindong, who sat on the bamboo chair, had already used the infrared camera to clearly see everything in the dark. A total of 10 people. He had really invested a lot. Young master. Xiao Yin, who was standing behind him, couldn't see anything, but the tense atmosphere made her unable to help but speak. Shoo! Don't say anything. The young master is here for everything. Using the weak light, she could see the side of Yang Qindong's face. At that moment, it was so resolute and so determined that Xiao Yin couldn't help but be mesmerized. Friend, since you're here, please show yourself. How long are you going to hide? A voice suddenly sounded. It was so powerful that it came from Yang Qindong's mouth. The voice was especially clear in the silent night. However, when his voice traveled out, he was still met with silence. After about 5 seconds of silence, Yang Qindong, who didn't receive a reply, laughed. What? You dare to come, but you don't dare to show yourself? If that's the case, then don't blame me for inviting you out. The loud laughter was accompanied by the sound of a body falling to the ground. At a corner of the courtyard wall, a humanoid figure fell to the ground without any signs of life. Following the sound of the body falling to the ground, there were a few heavy breathing sounds. Clearly, the sudden exposure and death of their companion had frightened some people. However, no one showed themselves. Yang Qindong knew that he hadn't done enough. He simply laughed again. Haven't you taught me a lesson yet? Another figure fell to the ground with a thud. 5 meters away from the dead body, a black figure rolled to the ground and stopped moving. 2 people had died in succession. Finally, the bandits hiding in the dark couldn't hold themselves back any longer. A booming voice suddenly sounded. Enough! We're out! One after another, black figures walked out. One after another, 8 living people suddenly appeared in the dark. They appeared in the open space in front of the study's window. Under the illumination of the light, their faces were revealed one by one. At the same time, the cold blades in their hands were clearly reflected. Although they were blades, there were all kinds of them. There were tang swords, standard military swords, and even Japanese swords. You're from the Japanese Empire? During this period of time, Yang Qindong had done quite a bit of research. Naturally, he recognized the blades as soon as he saw them. No, we stole them from the sea. The leader of the 8 people, Gao Xiong, who was also the tallest, took the initiative to stand out and answer. The scene just now had really frightened him. He didn't see them do anything. All he saw was a faint flash of light. However, before he could catch it, his brother was already dead on the ground. Gao Xiong had been at sea for many years. He had seen all kinds of hidden weapons and rare occurrences. However, it was the first time he had heard of someone being killed without a trace. From the moment he appeared until now, his face had been filled with shock. Stealing a ship from the Japanese Empire? Yes, that's what a man would do. A trace of appreciation appeared on his cold face. When he spoke, he seemed to have lost some of his coldness and had become more emotional. But before Gao Xiong and the others could relax, the cold voice sounded again. But you actually dared to have ideas about me. That's already a capital offense. What? You're the literati star that people talk about? Gao Xiong's face changed. He originally thought that Yang Qindong was an expert hired by the Yang clan to deal with him and the others. He didn't expect that he was actually the real master. When he asked this question, Gao Xiong clenched his teeth. Right now, he only wanted to chop up the 2 people who had been spying on him and feed them to the dogs. They had actually said that the Yang clan's 6th young master only knew how to study, and that his body was extremely weak. This time, he didn't follow the Yang clan to the Yang clan manor because his body wasn't good and he couldn't go out. But now, it seemed that this was simply bullshit. It was true that he was young, but his calmness was incomparable to them. How could they see a trace of weakness in him? Chapter 9. I'm the real deal. Yang Qindong purposely bared his teeth and admitted his identity. Then tell me, how should I punish you? Everyone, attack him together. He's only one person. At such a close distance, I don't believe that he... Suddenly, someone interrupted Yang Qindong's words. Then, a man on the far left shouted and prepared to charge forward. However, before he could finish his words, he followed in the footsteps of the other two men and fell to the ground with a thud, no longer breathing. Was the warning from before not enough? Yang Qindong's gaze swept over them and then looked at Gao Xiong and the others one by one. Who else? If you want to die, say it. I'll immediately fulfill your wish. This time, Gao Xiong finally saw through the clues. He realized that the weapon of the person who killed his brother was actually that unremarkable and extremely small iron spear. It was not that he had never seen a gun before. In the Ming Dynasty, there was a firearm battalion, also known as the Divine Arms Battalion. The soldiers there played with guns. It was said that if they hit accurately, they could take a person's life from 80 steps away. He was even lucky enough to see it once. He only remembered that the gun would produce a puff of smoke. Its movement was not small, it was not coherent, and its accuracy was even worse. It was not like this thing which was not only small, easy to hide, but also so accurate. Is this a gun? With a head full of doubts, Gao Xiong could not help but ask curiously. Yang Qindong really admired Gao Xiong's observation skills. First, he was able to judge the situation. When he saw that the situation was not good, he took the initiative to show weakness and stood out. Second, he dared to stand out, which meant that he had a certain degree of responsibility. At least, he was not a coward. As for the last point of observation, it was even more extraordinary. When others did not understand what was going on and were afraid, he could see the crux of the matter. If he met such a person in the future, Yang Qindong would even think of a way to let him enter the army. With proper training, he would definitely be a good seedling. Sigh, it's a pity. But when he thought of Gao Xiong's identity, Yang Qindong shook his head. These people were still pirates and enemies. As he spoke, Yang Qindong gently turned his gun and aimed at the leftmost pirate. He wanted to kill them one by name. Plop. When Gao Xiong saw Yang Qindong's actions, he decisively knelt on the ground. Sixth young master, we're not bad people. We're all forced by life. These brothers were born poor because they couldn't survive in their hometown. Otherwise, who would be willing to bend their heads to become pirates who might not even have a tomorrow? It's our fault for coming here today. We were blind. Everything is our fault and we should be punished. However, I was the one who started it. If you must die, just kill me. As for the other brothers, sixth young master, please be magnanimous and leave them with their lowly lives. They're willing to work like cows or horses. After speaking these words, Gao Xiong kowtowed to the ground. Plop, plop, plop. After a few kowtows, blood flowed out from his forehead. Big brother, if we're going to die, let's die together. At most, we'll still be heroes after 18 years. When the other 6 brothers saw Gao Xiong, who had always been unyielding in their eyes, kneeling on the ground and kowtowing like a helpless child, they were all moved. One by one, they followed suit and kowtowed to the ground. For a moment, the entire backyard was filled with the sound of people hitting the ground. Young master, they're quite pitiful. At this moment, even Xiao Yin, who had been trembling in the back, could not help but plead for mercy for these people. Didn't she not suffer any harm? Moreover, the other side had already lost 3 people. In the eyes of the kind-hearted Xiao Yin, they had already been punished and could be spared. Enough! Seeing that even Xiao Yin was speaking like this, Yang Qindong suddenly shouted. This shout was especially loud in the silent night. This shout shook Gao Xiong and the others, causing them to raise their heads and not know what to do. At the same time, this shout also shocked Xiao Yin to the spot. Then, she could not stop her tears from flowing out from the corners of her eyes. She clearly thought that she had said something wrong and made the young master unhappy. Who would have thought that in the next moment, Yang Qindong would suddenly stand up from his chair and casually place his gun on the chair. Then, as if performing a magic trick, he took out a handkerchief and wiped the corners of Xiao Yin's eyes. Silly girl, What are you crying for? I'm not talking about you. You won't look good if your eyes are swollen from crying. To tell the truth, although Xiao Yin was only 15 years old, the parts that were supposed to be protruding were protruding and the parts that were supposed to be sunken were sunken. Moreover, with her sweet appearance, she was a beauty in the making. These days of getting along with each other made him understand her kindness. How could he bear to make her cry? Seeing that the young master was not angry at her, Xiao Yin immediately smiled through her tears. Young master, you don't blame Xiao Yin? Young master can't wait to dote on you. How could he blame you? Yang Chendong continued to help her wipe her tears. Only the corners of his eyes were constantly paying attention to what was happening behind him. Naturally, he did not only have one gun on him. This was a habit of his. Just now, he had placed the gun there only to test the waters. Tiger's man had been out searching for a servant who practiced martial arts for a while now, but he had not received any news. This made him sigh at how hard it was to find a talent. Today, after seeing Gao Xiong's loyal side, especially the ability he had displayed, he wanted to subdue him. And this was just a test. Of course, there was a limit to this kind of test. If the other party had only wanted to beg for mercy, then now that there was an opportunity in front of them, they would definitely give it their all. If that was the case, he did not mind turning around and killing these bandits one by one. After probing, Yang Chendong was satisfied with the results. While he was comforting Xiao Yin, the 7 of them didn't do anything. Perhaps they were truly afraid of being killed by him, or perhaps they were truly loyal people. Since they were begging for mercy, they wouldn't do anything to betray others. But no matter what the result was, it proved that these people were useful. Since that was the case, Yang Chendong would naturally try to convince them to work for him. These people were pirates. And what did the pirates of 1445 represent? It was unlimited wealth and opportunity. This was the time when the Ming dynasty's government banned the sea. It was also the time when the power of the sea was at its weakest. If he could build a military force here, then not only would he be able to fool others, he could also open up a new battlefield overseas and cultivate a stronger power. At the very least, he would be able to find a way out for himself. He would not encounter any danger on land and not know where to go. Seeing that these people had no intention of acting rashly, Yang Chendong finally slowly turned around. You are facing 2 paths. One is to be killed by me, and the other is to submit to me and work for me. Make your choice. Gao Xiong, who originally thought that he was going to die, had a flash of light in his eyes. The 6th young master was actually willing to take them in as slaves. Although they might lose their freedom, from the strength he had displayed, he was undoubtedly a very good leader. Even if they did not die and only lost a bit of freedom, who would not be willing to submit to such a strong person? Thump thump thump, another wave of kowtows sounded. 6th young master, we are willing to submit to you and follow you as our master. Perhaps it was a temporary measure, or perhaps they were truly convinced. But no matter what, at least they were convinced now. As for whether they would have other thoughts in the future, Yang Chendong believed that when he showed enough strength, they would only have a deeper level of fear. At that time, even if he forced them to rebel, they would not have the courage to do so. Get up. Next, we will announce the first order for you. Deal with your 3 brothers. Also, come with me to the study. Pointing at Gao Xiong, Yang Chendong turned around and left. It seemed that he was not worried that these people would escape because they were no longer under his control. Boss. Seeing that there was no restriction, the other brothers all came to Gao Xiong's side. Gao Xiong naturally knew what they meant. The feeling of being under someone's control was not good. However, he had already submitted to them. Plus, he did not know what kind of environment he was in, and whether there were still people secretly watching him. He shook his head lightly. Deal with our brothers' bodies properly. Remember to stay away. I will go in and take a look. The light in the study was much clearer than outside. When Gao Xiong came in, he saw Yang Chendong sitting behind the table. 6th young master. When he saw the jet-black iron spear on the table, Gao Xiong could not help but tremble. He hurriedly knelt on the ground. What is your name? Where is your home? What do you do for a living? Yang Chendong's voice was ordinary. He was not old, but he gave people endless pressure. My name is Gao Xiong. My ancestral home is Fuzhou. Because my family's land was invaded by bandits, my parents were forced to die. In a fit of anger, I killed them and fled to the sea. Now, I mainly make a living at sea. Usually, I rob merchant ships. However, I have never robbed civilians. My targets are the rich families. Gao Xiong's language was quite clear. In addition to his good observation skills, Gao Xiong's ability gained Yang Chendong's recognition. Making a living at the sea? Then you are a pirate? Have you ever fought with other pirates? Yes, but because my strength is limited, I only have 2 warships and 30 brothers. My strength is limited, so I don't dare to go to the deep sea. The area I can move in is limited. Gao Xiong told him everything that had happened. Since things had come to this point, there was nothing left to hide. Oh, so you still have 20 brothers outside? Yes, they are all waiting for news at the illegal docks in Fuzhou. When Gao Xiong answered this sentence, he had a little plan in mind. That was, you can't just kill me. Otherwise, who knows if my brothers will avenge me. Then you won't be able to live in peace. Chapter 10. As for where the Black Dock was, it was just a name the brothers came up with casually. It was a secret base that no one else knew except for themselves. Yang Chendong, who looked only 15 years old but was mentally over 40 years old, how could he not understand the meaning behind Gao Xiong's words? After a mocking laugh, he said, "With such little prospects, what kind of profit can you make if you can only stay in the coastal waters? This little one also wants to take a look at the deep sea, but my strength is limited. Going there is just looking for death." Gao Xiong's words carried a hint of grievance. He was just a poor commoner who relied on loyalty and hard work to build up his family business. However, his foundation was too weak and his strength was limited. As the saying goes, poor people have low ambitions. Looking for death? Then if I support you and give you guns and cannons, do you have the guts to venture into the deep sea? Yang Chendong increasingly felt that Gao Xiong and the others were a force he could accept. It didn't matter if their strength was lacking. With his support, it was only a matter of time before they became stronger. Gao Xiong suddenly raised his head, his face full of disbelief. Even Xiao Yin, who was standing behind him, trembled. What was wrong with the young master? Why didn't he report to the authorities after catching the pirates? Why did he want to become friends with them? If the government found out about this, he would be beheaded. Ignoring the two's reactions, Yang Chendong continued to speak powerfully. You saw my gun just now. You know how powerful it is. Now that the opportunity is in front of you, whether or not you can seize it depends on how ambitious you are. I'm willing. How could Gao Xiong not know that this was an opportunity? He immediately kowtowed to the ground. Everyone had dreams, it was just that they weren't realistic. His dream was to dominate a region in the sea. Even if it was just a corner, he would be satisfied. Now that the opportunity was here, how could he let it go? All right, we'll leave the city at dawn. Take me to the Black Dock to take a look. Go. Yang Chendong waved his hand, as if telling Gao Xiong that he could leave. Gao Xiong left with a heart full of excitement. Now that there was no one else in the study, Yang Chendong turned around and comforted Xiao Yin. Yin, you must have been frightened tonight. Although she didn't see the corpse, Xiao Yin knew that she had killed someone. She must be very scared. Young master? Yin was fine? But these people are outlaws. Why don't you hand them over to the authorities? Just as Xiao Yin was about to say something, Yang Chendong waved his hand. He felt sorry for Xiao Yin because she felt sorry for him, but that didn't mean that his willpower would be affected. Speaking of which, he was a male chauvinist to begin with. Especially when it came to matters of life and death, he was even more determined. Yin, just pretend that nothing happened tonight. This is the price you have to pay for staying by the young master's side. You have to learn to forget, understand? What Yang Chendong didn't say was that if she couldn't forget him, then the two of them wouldn't be fated to be together. He would find a good family for Xiao Yin to marry, and they would part ways from then on so that they wouldn't implicate each other. Yes, nothing happened tonight. Xiao Yin was smart enough to see the seriousness in Yang Chendong's eyes. She was afraid that the young master would abandon her because of her disobedience. Very good, it's late. Go to sleep. All right, stay here tomorrow. I'll be going out for a while. But I'll be back soon. Don't worry. Yang Chendong had made up his mind to go to the illegal docks, but he couldn't bring Xiao Yin along this time. After all, it was an unfamiliar place, and it was dangerous. Oh, Xiao Yin obediently replied. Tonight's events had shaken her greatly, and she needed time to digest them. She had also heard that the illegal docks were a few hundred li away in Fuzhou. A weak woman like her would only be a burden if she went that far. Young master, you must be careful. Yin is waiting for you at home. In the courtyard, Gao Xiong had already told his subordinates about the conversation he'd had with Yang Chendong. When they heard that the mysterious sixth young master was willing to support them in making a living on the sea, they were all excited. The deaths of the three brothers had been greatly diluted. Speaking of which, the three of them had only recently joined, and they weren't very obedient to Gao Xiong. They weren't like the others, who wouldn't act rashly without their big brother's orders. Gao Xiong put the three brothers' corpses into the gunny sack. Originally, he'd planned to loot the Yang clan, but now he'd put the corpses of his own brothers in it. After everything was done, they huddled together outside the courtyard for the night. When the sun rose the next day, a carriage covered with a shed appeared outside the Yang clan's old residence. The corpses in the gunny sack were thrown inside, and Yang Chendong drove the carriage out of Jianghu Manor. Not far behind him were Gao Xiong's group of 7, who had split up. After leaving the city, they found an unmarked graveyard and buried the 3 corpses. Then the group of 8 headed for Fuzhou. The road wasn't very good, so the carriage wasn't very fast. Gao Xiong's group of 7 could barely keep up. Just like that, 3 days later, they finally arrived at Fuzhou, and another day later, they arrived at the so-called Black Wharf. Black Wharf was nothing more than a deserted seaside. Because it was suitable for large ships to dock near the sea, it became the place where Gao Xiong's group rested and got its name. As soon as Yang Chendong's group appeared, several figures appeared beside the reefs by the seaside. At first, they looked around vigilantly, but when they saw that Gao Xiong's group was among them, they all jumped out in joy. Big brother, is everything going well? How much wealth does the Yang clan have? A man wearing a tattered robe, but very spirited, walked out from the crowd with an iron blade in his hand, a smile on his face. But after taking 2 steps forward, the situation suddenly changed. The iron blade in his hand suddenly flew out of his hand, and a powerful force was transmitted to his arm, causing him to fall uncontrollably to the ground. 6th young master, don't worry, this is my brother Yu Guang. Gao Xiong, who had already seen Yang Chendong's power, naturally knew what had happened, and hurriedly pleaded for his brother. Tell your brothers to be careful when they speak to this young master. Yang Chendong's voice was still cold, as if he could kill at any time without blinking. Yes, yes. Gao Xiong hurriedly nodded his head, as if he was pounding garlic. Then, he shouted to his brothers who had emerged from the reefs, Don't speak, listen to the 6th young master. Ha! When these words were said, all the pirates were stunned. What was the meaning of this? Weren't they going to rob the Yang clan? How did they end up with the 6th young master? Ha! This name was very familiar. If they remembered correctly, their target this time was called the 6th young master. Ignoring everyone's puzzled expressions, Gao Xiong walked in front of Yang Chendong like a lackey. 6th young master, this is the illegal dock. Behind the reefs over there are the 2 warships that we currently have. Let's go take a look. Yang Chendong lightly nodded his head, then ignored everyone's surprised gazes and took the lead to walk behind the reefs. Everyone didn't understand why the 6th young master would appear here, but since their boss was following, they naturally wouldn't casually make a move. However, those pairs of eyes were still closely staring at Yang Chendong, as if they were ready to attack at the slightest disagreement. Yang Chendong was already used to this. With his head held high, he arrogantly walked past the reefs. What entered his eyes were 2 warships that were close to 20 feet long and 60 to 70 feet wide. Don't be fooled by the name warship. It was actually the smallest type of ship in the Ming dynasty. Not counting sentry ships and patrol ships, this type of warship was the smallest type. In the early Ming dynasty, the power of the sea was still very strong. Especially the treasure ships that Jianghu built when he went to the Western Ocean. They were huge existences, and who knew how many countries at sea were frightened by them. However, ever since the Ming Xuanzong era, the country had gradually stopped building ships because it was a waste of manpower and money. Until the current Ming Yingzong, they had directly banned the production of ships. Naturally, the production of ships had stopped, and some shipyards had closed down. The workers there had also been dismissed and returned home. It was because of the ban that the Japanese Empire was able to prosper in the future. Later on, Qi Jiguang fought against the Japanese on the coast. Since the treasure ships were no longer built, the next largest ship was the horse ship. The length of the horse ship was 37 feet long and 15 feet wide, and it was the second largest warship. The third was the grain ship, which was 28 feet long and 12 feet wide. The fourth was the passenger ship, which was 24 feet long and 94 feet wide. The last was the warship in front of them, which was 18 feet long and 60 feet wide. It had to be said that the frame of the Ming Dynasty ship was not small, but when it was used as a ship, the things inside were not worth mentioning. In Yang Chendong's eyes, other than a few bows and arrows, he could not see any other weapons. No wonder they could only deal with merchant ships that did not have any defensive capabilities. With such simple and primitive weapons, to be able to do such a thing, there would be a lot of losses. Moreover, to deal with merchant ships, they could only choose to deal with small targets. When Gao Xiong saw this, his heart skipped a beat. Could it be that the sixth young master did not like these ships? Speaking of which, his family was too shabby. Walking back to the shore from the ship, Yang Chendong looked at the 27 people in front of him. Although their clothes could be said to be shabby, their spirits were good. Apart from their skin being a little darker, their eyes were shining, and they were in good condition. This was the only thing he appreciated. Whether it was fighting a war or doing something, in the end, it was done by manpower. Therefore, human factors often directly determined whether things were good or bad. Looking at the crowd, Yang Chendong said in a clear voice, "My name is Yang Jitong. My courtesy name is Chendong. People call me the sixth young master. Your boss, Gao Xiong, wanted to kill me for money, but I discovered him and killed 3 of your brothers." Chapter 11. As soon as he finished speaking, the other pirates who had already discovered that the 3 of them were missing were filled with righteous indignation. From the looks of it, it was clear that they would attack at any time. Perhaps in their eyes, the sixth young master was too young and alone. Any one of them could easily deal with him. Seeing the restlessness of the crowd, Yang Chendong laughed mischievously. Then his gaze fell on a spear more than 20 steps away. It was unknown which pirate's weapon it was, but it was currently stuck in the ground. With a wave of his hand, a shot was fired. Bang! The Type 92 without a silencer let out a gunshot. Looking at the spear, it had already broken into 2. This sudden change shocked everyone. The pirates who were originally eager to rush up and capture him consciously stopped moving forward. There were even some who began to break out in cold sweat. To be able to accurately hit the spear from such a distance, then if they had rushed up, wouldn't they have become corpses by now? Seeing everyone's reaction, Yang Chendong was very satisfied. This was the effect he wanted. Very good. You should have seen the advantage of a weapon. When you still want to show off your courage and think that your strength is the best in the world, others can already take your head from 100 steps away. May I ask, how are you going to fight this battle? Facing such a question, more than 20 brothers lowered their heads, including the 2 leaders, Gao Xiong and Yu Guang. Seeing that everyone was shocked by his display of strength, there were even some who revealed fear and pain in their eyes. Yang Chendong knew that the effect of establishing his power had been achieved. Following the idea of showing mercy and mercy, the next step was to show mercy. You still have self-respect and can still see your own shortcomings. This is very good. At least it proves that you still have self-respect, still no shame, and can still be saved. Yang Chendong's voice suddenly became louder as he shouted, "No shame and then be brave." A person who is poor is not scary. What is scary is that he has developed a habit and does not know how to strive forward. A person who is weak is also not scary. What is scary is that he has accepted his fate and does not dare to fight anymore. Let me ask you, have you accepted your fate? No. Everyone shouted at the same time. Even Gao Xiong, who was standing in the crowd, couldn't understand why he had been provoked by those words. He even had to answer the other party's questions. Very good. Yang Chendong didn't give them time to think and nodded with satisfaction. His gaze then fell on Gao Xiong and Yu Guang. "You two come with me." Yang Chendong strode towards the carriage, followed by Gao Xiong and Yu Guang. During this time, Yu Guang asked Gao Xiong with a confused look. Boss? What did he mean by that? Also, isn't it said that the sixth young master of the Yang family is a literary star who has descended from the heavens, and only knows how to use the wondrous brush and blossoms technique, but his body is extremely weak? I don't know either. Shaking his head, Gao Xiong didn't know how to explain everything before him. He had thought that he was going to slaughter a little lamb that had yet to grow up. In the end, when he arrived, he discovered that it was a ferocious tiger that had just reached adulthood. That kind of contrast was as big as one could imagine. While the two were muttering behind him, Yang Chendong had already arrived at the side of the carriage, lifted the curtain and entered. When he came out, he looked at the two people who were already standing beside the carriage and said, "Go and carry out the things inside." Gao Xiong and Yu Guang instinctively agreed and also lifted the curtain to enter the carriage. Then, two extremely loud screams were heard. What's going on? The other pirates heard the shouts of their brothers and quickly ran over. A few of the bolder ones were ready to pounce on Yang Chendong at any time. Although the shot just now scared them, they still had a chance of winning by relying on their numbers. Before these people could do anything, the curtain of the carriage was lifted again, and then Gao Xiong and Yu Guang jumped down with a black machine in their arms. Ah! What is this? Is it a gun or a cannon? When the pirates saw that Gao Xiong and Yu Guang were unharmed, they no longer had any killing intent. However, when they saw the things in their hands, they all widened their eyes in confusion. It was no wonder they were so surprised. Gao Xiong and Yu Guang were holding a Type 87 35mm automatic grenade launcher. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a small cannon. Type 87 35mm automatic grenade launcher. Not only could it shoot in a straight line, but it could also shoot in a curved line. It was an automatic infantry weapon that could kill and break armor. It could suppress enemy fire points within 800 meters and kill exposed and hidden living targets within 1,750 meters. It weighed 40 jin and had a killing radius of 10 meters. It was nicknamed the mini infantry cannon. It had 15 rounds of ammunition and the trigger was on the side. This was naturally the weapon that Yang Chendong took out from the large warehouse after inspecting the warship. Since he wanted to subdue this group of pirates, he needed to pay a price first. Otherwise, how could he dominate the sea? Gao Xiong and Yu Guang, who were smiling, did not know the name of this weapon, nor did they know how to use it. However, looking at this black thing, they naturally felt a sense of joy. In their opinion, this thing must be very useful. Put it on the ground. Yang Chendong wanted to intimidate everyone. He pointed at the mini infantry cannon in Yu Guang's hands. Yu Guang answered mechanically and carefully placed Little Pao on the ground like a bride. He was afraid that he would hurt Little Pao. All of you move aside. Looking at the crowd, Yang Chendong waved his hand. Very quickly, the scene was cleared. Everyone's gaze fell on Yang Chendong. They wanted to see what he would do next. What would happen next? Without looking at the crowd, Yang Chendong casually glanced at the reef in the distance. He saw a huge rock standing among the rocks. He pointed and asked, "Do you see that slightly bigger rock?" Everyone followed his finger and immediately nodded. Yu Guang even took the initiative to answer, "I see it. That rock is about 700 steps away and weighs about 100 jin." Hearing Yu Guang's answer, Yang Chendong's face was filled with joy. He didn't expect Yu Guang's eyesight to be so extraordinary. He really was a good seedling. Seeing the admiration in Yang Chendong's eyes, Yu Guang naturally puffed out his chest. It was as if he was saying, "How is it? Aren't you amazing?" However, this pride disappeared with Yang Chendong's next sentence. "Then I'll choose that rock. Everyone watch closely. How do I destroy it in an instant?" "What? That's impossible." "It's definitely impossible. It's 700 steps away and it's so big. This reef is very sturdy after being hit by the wind and rain. I think he's just boasting." Voices of discussion rose and fell one after another. Clearly, to the people who did not have the slightest bit of experience, the goal that Yang Chendong mentioned was simply impossible to achieve. Everyone, quiet down. Yang Chendong didn't care so much. Instead, he laid down beside the mini cannon. His left eye was closed and his right eye was wide open as he started to aim. Everyone didn't know what would happen next, but they instinctively became extremely quiet. They stared at Yang Qindong's body, waiting to see what would happen next. Yang Qindong didn't make them wait for long. He didn't make any extra movements. His right index finger pulled the trigger on the side of the mini cannon. Following that, a flame suddenly shot out. When the flame flashed, many people were shocked. Before they could react, a loud boom was heard. Following that, someone shouted in their ears, "It hit! It hit!" It was indeed hit. Not only that, but the 50-kilogram rock that was 700 steps away had already turned into powder. There was no trace of it. Silence. Apart from the sound of the waves crashing against the reef and the heavy breathing of the crowd, there was no other movement. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. They were so shocked that their jaws almost fell to the ground. Among these people, there were a few former naval soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty. They were fortunate enough to have seen the cannons of the Great Ming Dynasty. However, not only were those cannons huge, but they were also loaded from the muzzle. There was no rifling in the barrel. The cannons didn't have or only had very simple aiming and recoil devices. When firing, they often needed to be manually ignited. The cannons only had solid shells made of stone or iron. Occasionally, there would be a small number of explosive bombs, as well as scattershot made of stone, metal, or lead. It was almost impossible for such a cannon to accurately hit an object 700 steps away. Even if it was a coincidence, it wouldn't be able to turn the rock into powder like this. If there was a comparison, it would be like the difference between heaven and earth. Just imagine, if such a cannon met the cannons of the Great Ming Dynasty, what would happen? Even a fool would be able to tell. It would probably be completely destroyed before the enemy could even get close. Even if the enemy managed to get close, it would be very difficult for it to cause any fatal damage. With a single cannon, everyone became silent. After a quarter of an hour, a putong sound was heard. It was the sound of Gao Xiong, who was hugging another mini cannon, kneeling on the ground. It had to be said that even though Gao Xiong was kneeling on the ground, he was still holding the mini cannon in his arms. From this, it could be seen that Gao Xiong was a person with great strength. Following Gao Xiong's kneeling, the others also came to their senses and followed suit, kneeling down with a series of thuds. At this moment they truly submitted. Whether it was because of the power of the cannons or because they were intimidated by Yang Qindong's imposing manner, they had now lost the power to resist. All that was left was their willingness to submit. "Sixth young master, we are willing to be your slaves. We only ask that you accept us." Gao Xiong was the leader of the group, so his words naturally represented everyone. Chapter 12. What was different from before was that after he said this, no one objected. It was clear that they had tacitly agreed to this fact. To put it nicely, they were pirates. However, in reality, they were not doing well. Otherwise, they would not have thought of going to Jianghu Prefecture, which was hundreds of miles away. Now that they finally saw hope, they naturally wanted to grab hold of it. There were a total of 27 people kneeling on the ground. This might not be worth mentioning in the eyes of others, but in Yang Qindong's eyes, this was not a small force. If used well, once it blossomed in the future, its effect would be shocking. It was like a small blade of grass. When it grew, it would also push away the boulder on its body, not to mention 27 people. Although he had long planned to take these people in, otherwise, he would not have traveled hundreds of miles to get here. However, when it came to accepting these people, Yang Qindong was still very cautious. He knew very well what kind of effect these weapons would have on the current Ming dynasty. It was not an exaggeration to say that it would be shocking. If he really exposed it too early, he was afraid that he would become the target of public criticism. Unless he wanted to rebel, there would be no place for him in the world. Caution had always been Yang Qindong's way of life. Otherwise, after completing so many missions in his previous life, who knew how many times he would have died? "Are you willing to take me as your master?" Under the expectant eyes of everyone, Yang Qindong finally spoke slowly. "Yes, we are willing." This time, not only Gao Xiong, but also Yu Guang and the other 25 brothers all answered in unison. However, if you want to become my subordinate, it is not an easy thing. You have to go through all kinds of tests. It will be very difficult, very tiring, and you may even lose your lives. Have you thought about it?" Of course, if anyone does not agree, feel free to say so. I will not make things difficult for anyone. I have prepared silver taels in the carriage. Anyone who leaves will get 5 taels of silver. With this, you can find a small place to start anew. So, I hope that when you make your choice, you will think carefully. There is no need to think. We are willing to take the 6th young master as our master. Gao Xiong was the first to answer loudly. We are willing. The other 26 people said in unison. In the past, they were still pirates who had no intention of leaving. Now that they could see hope, who would be stupid enough to leave? Originally, Yang Qindong was worried about how he was going to deal with them once they left. After all, the power of the cannon could not be leaked. Now that everyone had stayed behind, it saved him the trouble of thinking about other things. All right, since you're all willing, then this young master will also make a request. Those who want to follow me will have to go through a test, and before you are fully recognized, there are still 2 things you need to do, and that is loyalty and obedience. Loyalty. The one who is loyal is naturally me. No matter when or where, I cannot betray you. Otherwise, I will not be able to rest in peace even if I die. Obey. Even if there is a bottomless abyss in front of you, no one can stop for any reason without my command. Can you do that? With his own advantages, Yang Qindong could do a lot of things. Of course, there would be many people he would need, and how to manage these people would become the most important thing, and the most important thing was loyalty. If these people were disloyal, they would very likely take out their own weapons to deal with him. If that was the case, he would be smashing his own foot with a rock. We can do it. In this life, we will only serve the 6th young master. If we violate this oath, may the heavens strike us with lightning and we will die a horrible death. Gao Xiong reacted quickly and was the first to state his position. Following that, Yu Guang followed suit, and the remaining 25 people all gave the same speech. Good. Seeing that everyone had made the oath at that time, the people were ignorant, and the binding force of the oath was still very strong. Yang Qindong chose to believe these people. Of course, this was only the initial belief. He would have various methods to make these people truly submit to him. After saying good, Yang Hodong shouted, "Now, this young master will give the first order. Everyone, stand up." Walala. Everyone stood up. What was worth mentioning was that Gao Xiong was still hugging the mini cannon and did not let go. Looking at him, it was as if he wanted to sleep with him and did not have any intention of letting go. Regarding this, Yang Qindong did not care. There were many good things like this in the warehouse. What could be used and what level could be used completely depended on how much progress these people would make and how much territory they would conquer. The Ming dynasty that had just experienced the rule of benevolence was still in its prime. It would only decline a few years later with the Tumu Castle Rebellion. Going against the great Ming dynasty at this time was not a wise decision. Luckily, the current Ming Ingzong had banned the sea, and this left a big gap. If they only developed their forces on the sea, Yang Qindong believed that they would not reveal their strength. More importantly, they would be able to train their troops and create a lot of wealth at the same time. At that time, they would be able to occupy an island. Even if they were to fall out with the Ming dynasty one day, they would have a way out. In order to achieve this, the 27 people in front of him were the foundation. How to make use of them was something that needed to be carefully thought out. Regarding this, Yang Qindong used the separation training method. The separation training naturally meant that he would split up their small group and transfer the separated group to his side to receive training. This way, after interacting with each other for a long time, they would naturally develop feelings for each other. Adding on the fact that he had shown his strong side, their loyalty would be guaranteed. At this time, everyone stood up as if they were waiting for Yang Qindong's second order. However, the 6th young master did not give out any more orders. Instead, he chatted with everyone as if they were having a normal conversation. At the same time, he also said that he could stay here for 2 days. In these 2 days, he would first teach everyone how to use the mini cannon in order to increase their military strength and prepare for the expansion of their forces. Out of the 27 people, 7 people with good eyesight and strength were selected to begin simple training. Among them was Yu Guang. Originally, Gao Xiong also wanted to follow, but was rejected by Yang Qindong. Since he was the leader of this group, he needed to plan and strategize, and not personally kill the enemy. Of course, in order to convince Gao Xiong, Yang Qindong once again entered the carriage and took out 11 Type 81 automatic rifles. Commonly known as Type 81 automatic rifle, caliber, 7. 62 mm, length, 955 mm, weight, 3. 4 kilograms, magazine capacity, 30 rounds, effective range, 600 meters. Once the 11 Type 81 automatic rifles were taken out, the remaining 20 people's eyes lit up. They looked like men who had not seen women for a few years. They were just short of rushing forward to snatch them. Gao Xiong, come here. Ignoring everyone's excited gazes, Yang Qindong called Gao Xiong over and handed one of the rifles to him. Remember your gun number. Protect it as if it is your own life. If something goes wrong and your life is in danger, you must do one thing before you die. That is to throw this gun into the sea or smash it into pieces. Do your best to destroy it. Can you do it? Sixth young master, Gao Xiong can definitely do it. If it really comes to the point of death, I will destroy it first. I guarantee that it will be useless to anyone who obtains it. Gao Xiong replied loudly. His reward was a Type 81 automatic rifle from the future. There were still 10 left, but Yang Qindong did not immediately give them out. Instead, he looked at the 20 people and said, "Next, only half of you, which is only 10 people, will have the qualifications to be given a gun. As for who gets it, there will naturally be a competition. Next, everyone will practice aiming for an hour. After a day, I will give out bullets to everyone. Whoever performs well will naturally have the quota to be given a gun. Do you remember?" Hearing that 1 out of 2 people could have a gun, the 20 people's eyes instantly lit up. They all used the loudest voice they could muster and said, "Yes, sixth young master, please rest assured. We will do our best." The 10 guns were given out. 2 people in a group, practicing shooting. In a situation where there were no bullets, Yang Qindong taught everyone how to shoot. The so-called 3 points and 1 line was not complicated. After he said it, they naturally learned it quickly. It must be said that marksmanship was not that easy to practice. Yang Qindong deeply understood that the so-called sharpshooters were all fed with bullets. Therefore, his first target was Gao Xiong. After only practicing for 4 hours, Gao Xiong was fortunate enough to obtain a magazine of bullets and could finally shoot. Naturally, he was very excited. At the same time, he looked at Yang Qindong with a bit of emotion in his eyes. Gao Xiong thought that he was the first brother to be trusted. Otherwise, the 6th young master would not be afraid that he would turn around and aim with this godly weapon. Of course, how could the cautious Yang Qindong not know the existence of this danger? Therefore, he put on a bulletproof vest early on. The safety of the Type 92 pistol was also turned on. Once he felt that something was wrong, he could immediately attack. In the worst-case scenario, with the bulletproof vest, even if he was injured, it would be minimized to the lightest state. Gao Xiong finally fired his first shot. Under the envious and jealous gazes of his brothers, he fired at a temporary wooden sign that was erected 100 meters away from him. Bang! After a crisp gunshot, the wooden sign did not move at all. Instead, Gao Xiong's right shoulder trembled. That was the impact of the recoil. It was all because the opponent did not grasp the essentials of shooting. With a dejected expression, Gao Xiong was very depressed. At this time, Yang Qindong did not say anything to ridicule him. He who had led who knows how many soldiers already knew when to criticize and when to encourage. Chapter 13. Hold the gun tightly and use your right shoulder to support the butt of the gun. Breathe steadily and look straight ahead. Once you've calmed down, try firing. Gao Xiong followed the instructions seriously. When he felt that his body was no longer as agitated and his breathing had stabilized, his right index finger slowly touched the trigger. Then, he stared at the wooden sign in front of him. Bang! The second gunshot attracted the attention of the other brothers. When the first shot was fired, everyone laughed. Even though Gao Xiong was their boss, it did not stop them from making fun of him. Of course, it could also be said that they were venting their jealousy. Now that the second shot was fired, everyone was waiting for the result. The wooden sign 100 meters away was no longer as calm as before. The bullet went through the sign and flew out, leaving a black hole in it. I hit, ha ha ha. When he saw that he had hit the target, Gao Xiong jumped up excitedly and waved his gun as he shouted. Bang! A huge force suddenly hit Gao Xiong's waist. Under the powerful force, the man who weighed around 150 kilograms flew out horizontally and fell on the beach. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. They did not understand. Why did their boss get beaten up after hitting the target? They did not understand. That kick was from the sixth young master. His body did not look very majestic, so how did he have such explosive power? He was able to kick Gao Xiong, who was taller and stronger than him. Gao Xiong, who was kicked down, was also stunned. He did not know what he had done wrong. His waist was also hurting. He thought that the sixth young master was strong because of these godly guns that they had never seen or even heard of before. However, after this kick, he realized that he had underestimated the sixth young master's fighting ability. If the two of them were to fight, the chances of him winning would be very low. Throw the gun away. While he was still thinking about all kinds of questions, Yang Qindong's voice rang in his ears. Out of habit, he threw his Type 81 rifle to the ground. The gun was picked up again, but it was in Yang Qindong's hand. Then, a voice of criticism was heard. I've already told you that you can't point your gun at anyone. But you were so excited just now that you've pointed your gun at the brothers beside you countless times. Do you know which of our brothers would lose their lives if you accidentally fired the gun? Finally, Gao Xiong realized what he had done wrong. In that instant, Gao Xiong stood up, his face red. Sixth young master, I was wrong. Do you know your mistake? 100 push-ups. Immediately. There was no emotion on his face, and even his voice was unusually cold. Yes. After Gao Xiong agreed, he began to do push-ups on the sand beside him. This was also a training method that had just been taught. It was said that it could train all the muscles in the body. While Gao Xiong was doing push-ups, the others also had a warning in their hearts. It was a deep lesson for them to not point their guns at people casually. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. The grenade launchers used by Yue Guang and the others could already hit the target. Of course, this was the result of wasting hundreds of small shells. After leaving behind hundreds of shells, Yang Qindong took Yue Guang away, leaving behind a small team of 6 people to control 2 grenade launchers. It was more than enough. On the other side, 10 gunmen out of the 20 people had been selected. After firing thousands of bullets, they could basically hit the target. It was just a matter of their results. Among them, Gao Xiong's marksmanship was the best. He had a gun alone, which meant that he had a considerable advantage. The 10 gunmen who had won first place looked excited. They held their Type 81 rifles lovingly. The 10 people who did not win the competition looked bitter. They looked listless, as if they had lost a family member. All right, the 10 of you listen to orders. Hand over the guns in your hands to the others. You and Yue Guang will follow this young master back to Jianghu. Unexpectedly, Yang Qindong's words made a huge difference in the seemingly settled result. Before the 10 people could figure out why, the Type 81 rifles in their hands had already been snatched away by others. Then, it was their turn to look bitter. Yang Qindong didn't even spare them a glance. He would speak with facts. He decided to leave. Before he left, he called Gao Xiong alone and handed him a 6x30 scope binoculars. After I leave, you have to find a way to strengthen the team. At the same time, you have to understand the situation around you, especially the situation in Xi'an. Xi'an is the location of Tainan City in the future Taiwan Island. Don't be shy. The next time I come, I don't want to see you with only 2 warships. Sixth young master, don't worry. With the things you gave us, we have the final say in the waters around here, Gao Xiong said confidently. It was no wonder he was so confident. With guns, cannons, and high-powered binoculars that could predict the enemy's movements, he really could not imagine who could be his opponent. He patted Gao Xiong's shoulder to comfort him. Yang Qindong turned around and left. Yu Guang and the other 10 brothers were reluctant to part with him. It was not easy to get guns and cannons, and they were the kind that were so powerful that they could be called divine objects. But they really did have to follow the 6th young master back to Jianghu. They did not know whether to be happy or sad. Yang Qindong did not have to drive the carriage himself. This time, sitting in the carriage, he finally experienced the feeling of being a shopkeeper who did not have to do anything. Even when they stopped to rest along the way, there were people who brought him food and drinks. The only drawback was that the carriage was too bumpy. If it were not for his good physique, he would have fallen apart. The journey back was obviously faster. After only 3 days, they returned to Jianghu Prefecture and the Yang family's old mansion. The old housekeeper, Yang Chendong, had already brought people back from the Yang family manor. When Yang Chendong returned to the old mansion, he not only saw them, but also Tiger's Mane, who had returned a day earlier. Tiger's Mane had been arranged to look for servants. Over the past few months, he had spent 300 taels of silver. Finally, he had not come back empty-handed. He had brought back 30 strong men. "Young master, you're finally back." When she saw Yang Chendong enter the backyard, Xiao Yin had already rushed over with tears streaming down her face. If it were not for their statuses, she probably would have thrown herself into the young master's broad embrace. "Hee, young master, aren't you fine? Don't cry. You won't look good if you become a little kitten." Yang Chendong reached out and scratched Xiao Yin's nose, then laughed heartily. "Young master." Tiger's Mane suddenly appeared in a half-kneeling position in front of Yang Chendong. "You're back. It must have been a tiring journey." Looking at Tiger's Mane, who had been his study companion since he was young, but liked to play with weapons, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a rare gratification. "It's not hard to work for young master. This time, I've brought a total of 30 brothers. They're all young and strong, and they don't have families to worry about." Hu Mang reported the results of the battle without even raising his head. This was one of the things that Yang Chendong admired about him. He was never arrogant because of his close relationship with others, and he knew his own status. "Good. Where are they?" Hearing that there were 30 people, Yang Chendong was very satisfied. If there were too few people, it would be useless. If there were too many, it would cause too much of a commotion. These 30 people were just right. In order not to attract attention, I arranged for them to be at the Yang family manor outside the city. Tiger's Mane was indeed very reliable. He had thought of everything that needed to be thought of. This made Yang Chendong even more gratified. "Let's have a meal together, then go take a look." After rushing for 3 days and eating a meal, he brought Tiger's Mane, Xiao Yin, and Yu Guang, who were waiting outside the Yang family manor, and rushed out of the city. Yang family manor. It occupied 1,000 mu of land. It was done when Yang Rongfu was still alive. Now that the master and madam had passed away, the 6th young master, who stayed behind to look after the house, became the actual owner. This wasn't the first time he came to Yang family manor. He had come here many times when he ran in the past. It was the girl that Tiger's Mane liked. Her parents were tenants of Yang family manor. As soon as he entered, Yang Chendong instinctively asked jokingly, "Have you seen Feng'er?" "Not yet. I entered the manor last night. I didn't have time." It was rare for Tiger's Mane to blush. "Haha, Yin-er. Give Tiger's Mane 20 taels of silver. Let him buy some suitable clothes for Feng-er. After the new year, propose marriage to Feng-er's parents in the name of the Yang family." Yang Chendong laughed loudly. He was clearly in a good mood. "Thank you, young master." With a plop, Tiger's Mane, who was driving the carriage, suddenly jumped down and knelt on the side of the road. "All right, come up and drive your carriage. All right, tell this young master about those people." "Yes." After Tiger's Mane agreed, he turned and jumped onto the carriage. As he drove, he said, 28 of them are the subordinates of a man called Tang Shan. They were originally bandits, but because the taxes were too heavy, they couldn't live in the mountains. They have seen some blood. Most importantly, they have a good foundation and have trained a bit. When I went and told them that I would give them a new way out, they all followed me. All right, according to what young master said, there were originally more than 10 people. They didn't want to follow me, so I gave each of them 2 taels of silver to let them go. On the way back, we met a man called Lang Song. The funny thing was that he wanted to stop our group of 30 people by himself. We fought on the spot and he really knocked down 5 or 6 of our brothers. But in the end, we still managed to hold him down. He even shouted that he didn't eat his fill. Otherwise, our group of 30 people might not be his match. All right, this person was born in the army. It was only because his money and food were embezzled by his superiors that he couldn't live anymore. He escaped and just happened to run into us. Interesting. Yang Qindong listened to Lang Song's story and became curious. He really wanted to see what this person was like. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.